Hello, folks. I want to take a moment here to show you a sheet that I've created for you that I have titled the CSEP sheet, which stands for the Comprehensive Steps for the Explication of Poetry. This document, I believe, will really help focus your attention on all of the things that you can and should do when attempting to fully deconstruct and analyze a poem, and to prepare for anything that you would have to do academically with it, so that you just really kind of completely understand it. So I'm not going to go over this in great detail at all. In fact, I'm going to go over a very, very kind of primary understanding of it. And then I want to show you how we could get started on applying some of this stuff based on a prompt that we're going to be working with. And in fact, you're going to be doing some writing on it. So first and foremost, I have these steps broken down into initial steps. Let's try my little pen here. We have our initial steps, and we have some more in-depth steps, which require annotation. And let's talk a little bit about them. So first and foremost, we want to read the poem aloud from start to finish. We want to immediately attempt to determine the initial overarching meaning. We want to establish the tone or the mood of the poem. We want to identify the nature of the speaker. So these are all things that we're going to try to do relatively quickly after a first reading. Then we're going to go back and we're going to read that poem stanza by stanza or line by line if need be, and we're going to attempt to determine the meaning of each stanza or line. And in doing that, I would invite you to take your pen or your pencil and or create a Word document or whatever, and actually keep a written or typed documentation of your findings or understandings there. It's really, really important that you interact with these things and that you keep a working documentation as you do it. We're going to make sure that we comprehend all vocabulary words if possible. We'll research them if we can, and if we can't, we'll use context clues. We're going to want to comprehend all the literary and historical and biblical allusions, if present. We're going to note and document shifts or turning points. A good way to do that is to kind of circle where that exists, or make a little arrow or something right on the poem and then mark it with an S to designate a shift. And then we're going to identify literary devices and try to determine the function that those literary devices have on the meaning of the poem as a whole or as a part. And we're going to talk about that, and I'll kind of model that for you in just a minute. And then I have two other considerations here that sometimes play out in a meaningful way and sometimes they don't. And that is, we're going to consider the form, the structure, the spatial orientation of the poem. And we're going to look at meter and rhyme scheme and see if it influences anything. And oftentimes, to be honest with you, it doesn't. And that's why we don't really get too hung up on meter and rhyme scheme, even though it is relatively tangible. A lot of times it's just not very important. And then when we've done those things, we'll have done everything that we need to do to handle whatever task comes next. So for instance, here we have the 2007 FRQ. And in real life, we'd have about 40 minutes to write on this. And what it asks us to do is to read these two poems, A Barred Owl A Barred Owl, and The History Teacher. And to compare and contrast both poems, analyzing how the poet uses literary devices to make, in this case, their point, his point. Both of these authors are male. So let's take a look here at the first one. I'm going to read it to you. I'm going to give you some initial insights on it. We're going to go over those kind of the first steps. And then I'm going to put you in breakout rooms and assign you the task of going through those secondary steps that necessitate annotation. So, A Barred Owl by Richard Wilbur. The warping night air, having brought the boom of an owl's voice into her darkened room, we tell the wakened child that all she heard was an odd question from a forest bird, asking of us, if rightly listened to, who cooks for you? And then, who cooks for you? Words which can make our terrors bravely clear can also thus domesticate a fear and send a small child back to sleep at night, not listening for the sound of stealthy flight or dreaming of some small thing in a claw borne up to some dark branch and eaten raw. All right. So we've read the poem aloud from start to finish. Let's revisit this. We're going to attempt to determine the initial overarching meaning. We're going to establish the tone. We're going to identify the nature of the speaker. So we have a poem here that is discussing, in short, the propensity for adults to domesticate fear for their children, to downplay, to perhaps hide them from the harsh naturalistic reality of the predatory avian being of the owl. So my first thought is that this poem is critical of the tendency for adults to try to calm children at the expense of a portrayal of reality. Now, is that bad or good? I don't know. You probably don't want to tell a little kid that's afraid at night that something is being consumed by an owl outside of their bedroom window. So, of course, all parents probably do this, and but that's what the poem speaks about. The tone, I would say the tone is critical. It's not necessarily a harsh criticism, but it certainly illuminates this propensity to downplay the realities, the harsh realities in the natural world. Now I invite you to take a look with your small breakout cohort at those other aspects on the CSEP sheet of a more detailed analysis. And I would have you look at, I don't know. Let me give you an example. Here is a part that really, really sticks out to me. And this comes in the form of imagery. And I would say that what we have here is violent naturalistic imagery, dreaming of some small thing in claw borne up to some dark branch and eaten raw. And it's certainly not enough that we just kind of point out what it is. We want to talk about how it functions. And in this case, we have this violent naturalistic imagery of like a mouse being torn apart, consumed by an owl, which is obviously not good for the mouse, and in a very kind of visceral, gruesome image. And that is juxtaposed against this onomatopoetic version of the parent's reality, which just tries to kind of sugarcoat the sound of this owl and personalize it into something that makes it seem as if the owl is just asking, who cooks for you? And by the way, the sound of a barred owl does have that onomatopoetic kind of mirroring of the question, who cooks for you? who cooks for you? So I'm going to put you in your breakout rooms, and I'm going to have you apply those secondary steps, the in-depth analytical steps 5 through 9. And I'm going to give you about 15 minutes to do that. And then we're going to check back in with one another. And I would invite you to take notes while you do that.